Leader meeting for Monday, February the 24th. Could I please have the roll call?
Councilmember Abdelgawad.
Here.
Councilmember Barber.
Present.
Councilmember Berenson.
Present.
Councilmember Burke.
Present.
Councilmember Circo.
Present.
Councilmember Holman.
Present.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Present.
Councilmember Townsend.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no presentations and awards this evening, but we do have a personal appearance. Dr. Mike Slagle, our new incoming superintendent for the Ray-Pec School District, is here, and I'd like to invite him to the podium. Dr. Slagle.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Thank you for the informal, formal way of introducing myself to you this evening. My name is Mike Slagle, and I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you today and to introduce myself as the new incoming superintendent for the Raymore Peculiar School District. I couldn't be more excited to be a part of this community and this family, and can't wait to officially start working in the position July 1st, even though since the announcement was made in November, I feel like I've hit the ground running over here several days a week. I've had the great opportunity of visiting all of our schools thus far. I've been in most of our classrooms. We're going to start a second round on that visitation later next week. And so my goal is to visit each of our schools and try to get each of our classrooms at least 3 times before July 1st. So I kind of divided up the transition process into thirds, and I'm checkmark for that first third and moving forward on that. So I'm excited about what the school district and the community can do together over the course of the next several years. My interest in Ray-Pec started about 4 years ago. It was a Friday night in October, I remember, and I didn't want to attend any Kansas football games. I wanted to branch out and go find one on the Missouri side, and just happenstance, I picked one over here at Ray-Pec that evening. I came over and found you guys were playing Rockhurst that night at the end of October. On my way here, I found out it was also a playoff game that evening. I had no idea. Kansas starts about a week later, so it's the first round playoff game. Got here, came just to watch a football game. That was my whole goal. I got inside and I went into geeky administrator mode right away and started talking to kids. Started talking to a variety of just Ray-Pec High School students who were there. Went on my way to interact and to say hi, and I was blown away, honestly, by their friendliness, by their politeness. I didn't know what I expected coming into the stadium that evening. I was just here for a football game, but I remember leaving the stadium that night after the Ray-Pec victory, leaving the stadium that night thinking, there's something special going on over here in the school district. These kids were off the charts, mannerful and impressive. So fast forward 4 years later, when this position opened up, the first thought I had when I saw the Ray-Pec position was open was that evening some 4 years prior, meeting those kids and thinking there's good things happening here. Started peeling the layers back, starting talking to people who knew people about the Ray-Pec School District, and couldn't be more excited about becoming the school district's next leader and starting July 1st. So I did my homework on this school district. The people and the excellence kept coming to the front as being the primary drivers as to what's going on and some of the good things here. So it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this school district. Currently, I hold the position as Deputy Superintendent at the Blue Valley School District just across state line in Johnson County, Kansas. I have a 25-year career there in Blue Valley, have served in leadership roles in every aspect of the school district, starting with Director of School Administration on the academic side, but then also as District Activities and Athletics Director, a stint as Planning and Development Director, leadership director roles in IT, legal, operations, transportation, human resources. You get the idea. Most of the facets of the school district I've held leadership roles in. My teaching career started in Battle Creek, Nebraska, and I was a social studies teacher there, and it was my senior year in college when I took a course called Urban Geography and fell in love with how the cities develop and the interplay between development, economic development, and how people make use of their spaces. So a year into teaching, I was teaching social studies, And my wife said, why don't you pursue that other interest of yours? See what happens with that. And so I took a little hiatus and went to the University of Iowa and pursued a degree in urban planning. And for a 3 to 4 year period after my urban planning studies, I was over as an economic development, community development planner for medium-sized cities in the state of Iowa. And it led me to see the interplay between strong school districts as an economic development tool and the other items that make cities great. And so was very appreciative of that experience. What brought me to the Kansas City area was a position with the Johnson County government as the county planner and GIS specialist back in the early 90s. But I never lost that passion for kids and for wanting to be in the classroom. So when the position at Blue Valley opened up as the director of planning and development, kind of combined my two passions, being able to work with cities in the development of schools, as well as making sure those schools were outstanding for student achievement and student success. So that's what led me back to the full circle to the education side of things. At the time in Blue Valley, we were growing by over 1,000 students per year. I've had the opportunity to work on the academic and operations side of opening 16 new schools over the course of my career. Hope to bring some of that expertise here, as I know the Ray-Pec School District is growing by leaps and bounds, and to kind of navigate that future together with the school district and with the cities that be. So I know I don't tell you anything you don't know with this next statement, but it's something I hold near and dear as a belief. Great schools, outstanding public safety, great recreational opportunities, and housing price points that are attractive are what drive community development. And I'm eager and excited to be at least the leader of one of those 4 areas and working with you as we forge the path together for some great things happening in the Ray-Pec community. Be happy to try to answer any questions. Do you have any?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Slagle. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Holman?
I just wondered if you had any theological background, because I was about ready to say amen at one point during your statements. It is great to have you here. We have obviously have very close connection with the schools and have had with Dr. Monsis and the predecessors in front of him. I cannot remember one that applied, got the job, and then came applied with us again. So this was very interesting. It was great to have you here. I know we've met a couple times before, but I look with great anticipation to your tenure here, sir. I think it's going to be a very good one. Thank you.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Slagle, that was very interesting, and again, thank you very much. Like Councilman Holman said, we've never had kind of somebody do a preemptive strike on us like this, so that was very nice. One of the things you mentioned is a strong school district, and I think everybody on this council either has children, had grandkids, or had past kids in the Ray-Pec School District. So it is very important to us. And it also is, it's a quandary for us too, because it is so strong, everybody wants to move to Raymore. So that's one of the things that we struggle with, with that. So I like it. I want to keep it going. I want people to have this Raymore experience and have the Raymore Peculiar School District experience. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. It's an exciting time to be here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, Dr. Slagle, thank you again for coming up tonight. We look forward, because of your past background. You and I have had a chance to visit a little bit about your economic development background and planning background, and we're excited that you'll be able to give us even further input into that area as our entire community grows. So thank you again, and we look forward to working with you.
I look forward to working with you, and I'm a phone call or email away. If you ever have a question or need me for anything, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to staff reports. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask Mr. Krass to make a staff report for our Public Works Department.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have submitted my written report, and then the biggest thing we have going on this week is the bids for Westgate open on Thursday. So we are Westgate Drive rather. We are very excited about that. With that concludes my staff report. I am available for any questions council may have.
Thank you. Any questions of Michael? Seeing none. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Mr. Krass. I would ask Mr. Mustine to make a report for Parks and Recreation.
Thanks, sir. Mayor, members of council, I have submitted a written staff report, but I wanted to first of all say thank you to you and the Park Board for allowing us for continued education. Myself, Superintendent Rulo, and our new Recreation Coordinator, Corinne Dowd attended our Missouri State Association conference last week. This is kind of her first opportunity to do some continuing ed with Parks and Rec, and I think she's found that she's very pleased with her decision to come into our field. So as we were going through the conference, there's an exhibit hall. I'm sure you guys have all been to those types of continuing education things, but vendors and things are there. And I stopped at one of our vendors who has worked with us in designing the rack and some stuff, and I grabbed their promotional piece, and I found it very interesting of how proud they are of the rack and also their work on the amphitheater and the North Shelter. So not only are we proud of it, they're proud of their work too. So I just want to bring that and kind of brag about that a little bit. It's neat to see your stuff in you know, a hall of 500 of your peers. So I'll move on here. We got basketball, or soccer, volleyball registrations in this Friday. So if anybody's needing to sign their kids up for that, we'll take them till this Friday. Basketball tournaments, the basketball season's coming to an end. End of season tournament is March 7th. And baseball and softball are currently open for registration. You got till the end of March for that. And a couple special events. Again, I want to kind of brag on Corinne. She's hit the ground running and done a fantastic job. She sold out the Valentine's Dance. And then we have 4 spots left in the Spring Craft Show in 2 weeks. She's got 6 of 7 trucks already booked for the food truck event coming up. And Easter's off and running, so she's been interviewing kids for camp counselor positions and stuff. She just really pleased with that selection and glad we could keep her in the Raymore employment. So that concludes my staff report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Nathan? Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mustine. I would ask Ms. Harmer to make a report for the Communications Department.
Thank you, sir, Mayor, members of the council. I have been working with our finance department to create a communications plan to inform our residents of the upcoming elimination of the 75-cent fee for when you pay your water bill online. That fee is going to go away May 1st, and also we will have a faster and more secure way to make payments by phone. So these changes that go into effect in May, we're working on that plan, or actually the plan is complete, but we'll start getting that word out in just a few weeks. And the Census 2020 is coming up also, and so I'm working with our Development Services Department to create that communication plan to remind our residents to participate and complete the census. And I am updating staff portraits this week, so I've been taking a lot of photos, and that's all I have tonight for you.
Thank you. Any questions? I had a question. So this weekend, several of us had an opportunity to attend the gala for the RAPEC Foundation. So I got to sit at the table with the constables, and one of the things that we talked about was recyclables and how we're still have some contamination issues. Are we going to put together any kind of an education leaflet on that to kind of re-educate folks on recyclables?
Well, we did send out a mailer right before Christmas to everybody as a reminder, but and I've been kind of every once in a while sharing things on social media from Bridging the Gap, which is big recycling program through Mark. So I will continue to put that word out and reshare that information.
I think I did see the one from Mid-America Regional Council that you put out. Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
So,
I'll keep putting the word out.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Ms. Harmer. Just a couple of items administratively. For those of you who review your agendas from the past year and go back and look at things, you will note that in all years past at this particular meeting, we would be bringing the business license renewals to you all for the 10-day extension. Of course, that changed in code this year. It is now totally an administration matter as far as notifying them. That is why that is not before you this evening. It's being taken care of administratively through the city clerk's office. Next week, your March 2nd work session, there will be 2 items on the agenda, or there are 2 items on the agenda so far. The first is a demonstration video of the new license plate reader, and the second one, Mr. Crass will be presenting the 2020 Street Preservation Program to you all. That concludes staff reports this evening, sir.
Thank you. Any question, Mr. Fearborn? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We only have the one item on our consent agenda tonight, which is the City Council minutes for the February 10th meeting. I'd entertain a motion to accept.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented to include item A, City Council minutes from the meeting on February 10th, 2020.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. We'll now move on to unfinished business. Could I please have the second reading of Bill 3524 by title only?
The second reading of Bill 3524 by title only, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Raymore, Missouri to enter into a contract with the city of Peculiar for animal sheltering services.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3524, award of contract for animal sheltering services.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. There's motion and second to approve the second reading of Bill 3524. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. We'll now move on to new business. Can I please have the first reading of Bill 3529 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3529 by title only, an ordinance of the city of Raymore, Missouri amending the zoning map from C1 Neighborhood Commercial District and C2 General Commercial District to PUD Planned Unit Development District, a 5.04 acre tract of land located north of Pine Street, east of Sunset Lane, Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. This item requires a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing at this time, and I would ask for a staff report.
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Cataret to begin the staff report on this item.
Thank you, sir. This evening, the applicant has a brief presentation he would like to share with those watching as well as the council. I'm going to broadcast that. And then when his presentation is over, I'll cancel the broadcast and I have a brief staff report.
All right.
Good evening. My name's Sean Siebert. I'm with SPC LLC, which is a company formed by my partner, Andy Mackey, which sits behind me, and myself. We're here this evening to ask for a rezone and replat of Town Center 4th, a commercial property, to a PUD. I'd like to start this evening by telling you guys a story. I grew up at 332 North Park, which is right behind the fire station. I lived in a duplex built and owned by my father. My dad built the first 5 duplexes on Park Street. 30 years ago, as a little boy, I played in the fields of the property up for rezoning and replat this evening. And in fact, on one occasion, the fire station, they had a Dalmatian. It bit me on the butt. And they relocated that dog. But when the city's economic development director, Matt Tapp, called me and asked me to look at this property for a potential multifamily development, I was very excited to explore the potential to make a project work. As we began our due diligence, we quickly concluded that rezoning the property to a PUD would fit the site's highest and best use. Andy and I are responsible for over a half dozen communities across Kansas City. The most relevant is Oak Ridge Farms, just 4 blocks from the subject property. The goal from the beginning was to take what was done in Oak Ridge Farms in terms of quality and design and duplicate it here at Sunset Plaza. 30 years ago, when I was a little boy, the property was a field, and today the property is still a field. Andy and I would like the opportunity to take that field and turn it into something more for the city. We would like to turn this property into a high-end townhome community, but not just any townhomes, but the nicest in the area. A community Raymore can stand behind and be proud of. We're going to go ahead and flip to slide 4 so we can review the notes of Sunset Plaza. Here on slide 4, you can see the overall master plan for our PUD. The main takeaway on this slide is the common open space. This area accounts for 10% of our total area. There's easements to the common area from Sunset and Conway, and this area makes up about roughly half an acre. I'll move over to building elevations on 6. These are our 3 types of building elevations. Within our PUD, these will be the only building elevations we can build. Within a PUD, it's all planned out, so what you see is what you get. Our 3 elevations are all 3-bedroom and 3-bathroom. Per my other projects like Oak Ridge Farms, our buildings will offer subtle, modern exterior features. Moving along. Here you can see the different phases of our project. We have phase 1, 35 units, phase 2, which is 8 units, and phase 3, which is 24 units. Although we show phases, our project will be built concurrent. It's just the phases are shown in starting order. So we'll start with phase 1, move on to 2, and then 3. You can see off to the right-hand side the various types of buildings and the footprints and where they'll be located. Slide 8 here, you can see phase 1. The reason why we kind of depict phase 1 and break that apart is because everything, all the infrastructure that's needed to build a building is in the ground. So all the streets, the curbs, the water, the sanitary lines, it's in and ready for building. So that's why we kind of break that apart. Flipping through here on 9, you can see various different aerial perspectives from around the community. You can see the red dash line depicts where phase 1 is located in those buildings. Here we have more perspectives of the community, more from a foot level. You can kind of see below where, which direction you're looking there. On 11 here, we're depicting phase 2. All the infrastructure for phase 2 is in the ground. There's a 4-inch sanitary line that needs to be increased to an 8. It's a pretty easy, it's a simple road bore to go from a 4 to an 8. So that's why we've pulled that off and put that aside into a second phase. Another thing, since we're on this slide, we'll stay on 11. You can see early in the project, building lots 1, 2, and 3, those driveways we're going to back out onto Sunset Street. We've taken city staff's recommendation, and we're going to put a private drive in there, so that cars won't be able to back out onto Sunset. You can drive out through one of 2 exits, one on Sunset or the other on Pine Street. We haven't come up with a traffic flow yet, but we will. Here on 12, you can see more aerial of the phase 2 there, dashed in red. Moving along here on 13, shows you a picture of the Sunset Building. The Sunset Building's a little bit unique because of the grade and the rock that's in the ground on the site. There's a lot of rock in the ground on this site, so the building goes with the grade. This plan is known as a reverse basement. So you pull into the garage in the basement. The garage goes all the way through. It's 48 feet deep. So you could technically pull 2 cars in deep if you'd like. You walk upstairs to the main level, and then you walk upstairs again to the 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. This building will only be featured on Sunset, and all 3 buildings on Sunset will be the same building. So they'll all look similar. And like I said, what you see here is what you get. 14, we're depicting phase 3. Phase 3, all the infrastructure needs to be put in. So this is a private drive. There's a fire lane out as well, and all the sanitary and water lines need to be installed. So in most cases, we'll start right here first while we're building phase 1, go to phase 2, and by the time we get to phase 3, we'll start building right away. There's 24 units total in this phase. Here in 16, we have some more aerials. If you look close at the bottom right-hand photo there, if you look close at the bottom and on the right, you can see the tall evergreen trees. We'll come to a slide later to review that, but you can see where the screening will be. It'll be against the adjacent multifamily property on Park, and there's a vacant commercial lot that's there to the north. More photos here on 16 for phase 3. Moving into HOA key points and guidelines. The property will have an HOA. It'll be required to have an HOA. The HOA will be the same HOA that I have in Oak Ridge Farms. I would classify the HOA to be restrictive in nature. Some key building features. We'll have a full lawn care on the outside. We had some comments at the planning and zoning meeting about how we maintain and the type of products we use outside. We mow weekly. We have 7 different lawn treatments we put on the lawn. We seed biannually and aerate. That's really the key to having a good looking lawn. And then we pull the weeds in the landscaping beds every 2 weeks. But I got a note here from my lawn care provider. He uses a slow release organic fertilizer. They apply it in a granular form that minimizes runoff, and it's the same product that they use in lakefront communities that have restrictive guidelines against treatments like that. All exterior maintenance on our buildings will be provided, and 100% of our outside will be stucco. So it'll be stucco outside. Our trash cans, we have a requirement that the trash cans will be stored inside. That was the thing that we had from the beginning. So we increased all of our garages 4 feet to hold the trash cans. So we didn't go from 16 to 20. We have a full-size garage. You can fit a full-size vehicle in it, an F-150, a Toyota Tundra. Then we added 4 feet to that. So our minimum garage is 26 feet deep, and it has a knockout for the trash cans, and will require that they be stored inside unless it's trash day. Yard signs and yard art prohibited. Potted plants limited to 1 per door. No commercial ventures operated within the premise. No boats, trailers, or commercial vehicles parked outside the garage. And I have not rented to people because they have a commercial vehicle and it doesn't fit in the garage. So that's something we stay strict on. No overnight street parking as well. So going into the parking plan and capacity, when Andy and I started, we wanted to hit a 3.5 cars per unit average. So that means we can have, what we wanted to have was that we could have 3.5 vehicles in a garage or singly parked on a driveway. And that's the number we wanted to hit, not on the street. The parking average that we hit was 3.68. So we feel that we've answered the objective of parking. One way we've done this is by making 65% of our units 2-car garages. So, you know, a lot of people ask why when we drive around Raymore and we look at, you know, multifamily projects, nobody uses the garage. There's parking everywhere. What makes our projects different than others is that our garage is deep enough to park in. So that's a big difference. And also the amount of 2-car garages we have. You just don't see multifamily with 2-car garages. Privacy through vegetated planting. So this is the screening buffer that we worked with city staff on. So here at lots 8, 11, and 12, we'll have screening installed there. That's a vacant commercial lot to the north. At lot 12 and 13, we'll have screening installed there, and that's multifamily property to the east. The type of screening we've chose is tall evergreen trees. with low-lying branches that touch the ground. I own a tree farm in town, so we'll be okay on the trees here. Building features. So on 24 here, you can see a complete product that I have over at Oak Ridge Farms. So this building exists, it's 4 blocks away. We have 100% stucco on the outside. I like to throw in a little bit of metal on the roof. Contemporary kind of garage doors with the glass windows. And those lights that are on the front there, I actually have those custom made by a friend of mine. On the inside, it's just as nice as the outside. We do real wood flooring throughout. We have no carpet in any building that we have. Quartz countertops, not just in the kitchen, but in all the bathrooms. You can see down here on the bottom right slide there, that's a slab that I have over there in Oak Ridge. That's a 1-car garage. And instead of having an 8-foot door, like most people would have, that's a 10-foot door. So you can pull in and you can open your car door all the way. So, like I said, there's reasons why people don't use garages on other projects. Moving on here, last page. These are photos of, again, a finished unit over in Oak Ridge Farms. Again, we have tile showers. You can see in that bottom middle picture. We install freestanding bathtubs, wood floors throughout. So these aren't renderings, these are real photos. Now that we've reviewed all the plans for Sunset Plaza, I'll leave you with this last comment regarding the property at hand. If we don't do something with this property now, then when will we? If it's not me to do something with the property, then who is it? Thank you for the opportunity to present to you guys this evening. Thanks.
Thank you.
I will quickly go through a few staff comments after the applicant's presentation. The bill before you, Bill 3529, it does propose reclassifying the zoning of 5 acres. As described by the applicant, it's located east of Sunset Lane, north of Pine Street. And the request is to go from C1 and C2 commercial districts to planned unit development, which allows for the 67-unit townhome development. A request for a reclassification of zoning does require a public hearing. I do need to enter into the record the notices that were mailed to the adjoining property owners of the public hearing, the notice of publication in the Journal, our Unified Development Code, the application that was submitted, our growth management plan, staff report submitted to you this evening, the proposed development plan, which was included in your packet, and all the resident comments that were received for when the application was initially filed in 2019, as well as those most recently filed with the city. So in the Town Center Fourth plat, in this area, there's 8 undeveloped lots currently, all zoned commercial. The request this evening is to rezone 6 of those lots. The 7th lot is located west of Dr. Simmons' dental practice on Conway Street. This lot's at the corner of Sunset and Conway Place at the southeast corner. This lot will remain zoned commercial. What's important about this lot is it has visibility to 58 Highway. So anybody going through the intersection can actually see a commercial building that could be constructed on this lot. So purposely left out of the request for rezoning. The 8th lot, as the applicant identified, is located just south of the fire district's training tower. That lot had a contract on it for purchase and was excluded out of this development. But so it would maintain its commercial zoning, although I don't know that commercial use is what was intended for that property when it was under contract. So that we have a total of 6 lots, again, part of the rezoning request. The area itself's been zoned commercial since 2000. Only Dr. Simmons' building has been constructed on that phase of Town Center. And there's been absolutely no interest in commercial use. The entire time I've been here, nobody has been interested. It's had a couple of different listings for commercial use from different agents with no takers. The lots being proposed for the rezoning are simply just, they're not visible from 58 Highway, and they're not viable commercial sites. We do believe as staff, the 6 lots are prime for residential development, for townhome development. We think the townhomes make a perfect transitional use. We have single family in the town center neighborhood. We have 2-family homes on the south side of Pine Street and on the west side of Park. So we're getting the transition. We're looking at these lots going multifamily development, and then to the north would be commercial, and to the west would be commercial. So a true transitional zoned area. For this rezoning request, there have been actually 2 good neighbor meetings held. The initial one was on May 22nd, and then a second, more informal one was held on June 18th, where the applicant stayed after a planning commission meeting to talk more with the residents. It was after that meeting, before the planning commission actually had a hearing on this request, where the applicant placed a hold on the review of the application, and that hold stood through the end of 2019 until now. As you're well aware, over the last couple of years, the residential market in Raymore, it has been shifting. The development applications that we've seen, the interest from the builders and developers has been more in the demand for 2-family and multifamily projects. So Mr. Siebert's the one that's developed the Oak Ridge Farms, which is the 2-family development. We've seen the lofts at Fox Ridge come forward with the apartment community. And we've seen the Venue, the townhome development down in the Goodrich. So the more recent projects you've seen have been 2-family or multifamily developments. But what's important, what I want to point out, is that Raymore remains predominantly a detached single-family community. When we look over the last 10 years of all the units being built, over 80% of those units are single-family. We've had these multifamily developments coming forward, but it hasn't tremendously shifted that spectrum of going from a single-family community very far. If we included all of the units that we've approved, all the single-family, 2-family, multifamily, we're still over 0.75% detached single-family. So a point I think sometimes gets forgotten. Right now, right in front of us, we've seen multifamily developments, but we are still building a lot of single-family homes in Raymore. Staff did recommend approval of the rezoning for several reasons. This rezoning allows several improvements to be made, one of them specifically being done to the stormwater pond that would not be done if it was developed commercially. So the improvements are both with quantity of how the stormwater is held, as well as quality of the stormwater being released. We have, under the PUD, control over the architectural construction of the site and how it is laid out. That you wouldn't have that control if it was a standard R3 type zoning district. And we also support it because it does provide additional housing near our commercial areas. We repeatedly hear that from our businesses. We need to have additional housing near the commercial areas. And so we feel this is truly an appropriate transitional use of this land. On February 18th, our Planning and Zoning Commission had the public hearing. They did submit proposed findings of fact for your consideration as part of this application. And they do recommend approval of the rezoning request at a 7-to-1 vote. It is subject to 5 conditions that are listed in your staff report. Then I did include the minutes of the meeting because there was a lot of discussion by the commission. I wanted to be sure that the council saw all the discussion that the commission had. That would conclude staff report, sir.
Thank you. This time I'd open it for questions of staff or the applicant. If anyone has any questions? Yes, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions for staff. Well, this first one, looking at the staff recommendation, the 5 conditions at the end, I realize this is rezoning, so I wouldn't necessarily bring this up unless it was one of the conditions. Number 5, the HOA. Are these designed to be rentals, leased, sold to homeowners? What all the above, or?
Yeah, this will be a high-end rental community.
Okay, so how does an HOA work when there are no owners,
I think what you find, well, there are owners, so, being the
Well-
declarant,
besides the developer, who would be the owners?
myself. But we can still control the HOA. I think.
I just don't understand how a homeowners association works when there's not homeowners.
Yeah, so I control the board of two, and I'm also a sitting board member on another one called Brighton Crossing. I think maybe if I was to anticipate, maybe what you're getting at is sometimes there's a propensity for HOAs to not enforce certain things, whether it's trash day or parking. It's a little bit different. We give one warning and then a fine. And you have to enforce that with your lease as well. And otherwise it looks like a penalty. Otherwise then you have HOA expenses, et cetera, that are unnecessary lien filings. You'd be filing a lien on yourself. And that's not the case. It'd be enforced with your lease as well.
So are there HOA dues on top of the rent?
No,
or is
but
that-
the HOA, the covenants and restrictions that won't run with the land, so in case we should sell, the same quality and standards that were there when we owned it would run with the land.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, again, on these 5 points of interest, Sean, or Mr. Mackey, when you talk about the buffer zone and the trees, and I know you have a tree farm, now you guys are going to make sure you got a tree arbiter, I think they call those, to make sure you get the right trees that over the long haul as they grow, they won't swell, they won't get fat, they won't look gaudy, they won't have to be trimmed all the time. Are you going to get the right trees? I know that question came before with the P&Z. People are worried about if you put the trees in, as they develop and grow, are they going to still look nice 5 years from now, 8 years from now? Or are you going to have a lot of problems trimming them or taking care of them?
I said, yeah, to answer your question, I do own a tree farm, but I bought 100 trees last week, not from my tree farm. I try to take as many trees as I can, but you're right, there's a lot that goes into it.
A lot of different trees, yeah, make sure you get the right one.
If you drive through Oak Ridge Farms, you can clearly see the trees that I've spayed and the trees that I've purchased. Down there on 1 street, it's Maplewood. I got 6 duplexes down there, and I bought 75 trees. And I planted them all around, and I also spayed trees down there. So to answer your question, I know what goes into, pulling the tree out, making it look right. Because of what goes into it, I purchase trees as well.
Another question on 5. When you talk about the parking, Pine or up to Sunset, and in front of the buildings, I know a lot of concerned people, since you talked about it here, about how they park or cannot park. Are we going to have something set from that Sunset from Pine to 58 where we alleviate any parking there and make sure it doesn't get people parking on both sides anytime and has congestion? I know it's a lot of question for a lot of people. I know we talked about it last year when you gave your presentation, and when we talked about with you and Mr. Craddock, that actually going from that and putting no parking signs to alleviate any parking anytime, so it won't you don't want 2 cars there, and then you really squitch it up and people are worried they're going to get traffic problems getting a number of cars through there. But I know we talked last year about it, and you guys were both, and Mr. Craddock said no parking signs, putting that no parking would be fine. I know it's a question people didn't know about and they were curious about, which I think would be very important on the parking on the street.
I'll let Jim start with what's mandatory, and then I'll comment.
We wanted a combination of city-restricted parking. We certainly don't want anybody parking on Sunset north of Pine Street, being a collector road and with the curve. That needs to stay vehicle-free of parking. But we're also, from a city standpoint, looking at limiting parking on one side of Conway Street and restricted parking on the north side of Pine Street in certain areas as well. But we wanted the developer, through their lease agreements and through their own restrictive covenants and HOA requirements, to restrict parking as well. There's a private drive for those east 4 buildings that needs to have restricted parking as well, to make sure that emergency personnel always have a free flow through there, and other service vehicles as well. So it's a combination of city and private property owner restrictions there.
Yeah, I know they park on the one side that the buildings, duplexes are on now. And then if you have the other side, as you build these, restricted on Pine there, and then of course going north on Sunset. I think that's a big concern for most people I've heard from. And then of course, so that's why I was curious, since it's in these 5 major.
Maybe to clear up what Jim said, so where can parking on the street happen? On one side of Conway and on one side of the private drive. Is that, so that's where
Okay,
parking can happen.
okay.
Oh, yeah. The Sunset units, they have really deep driveways on there, and then, again, like I said earlier, you can drive all the way underneath those buildings, so.
And when you gave your presentation last year, it was a really good presentation from A to Z. There's only 6 of us here that afternoon, it was during the week, so,
Yeah.
but I went through it and it was really good. So that's why I'm remembering things you talked about that day I was here, and now we're bringing it back up here again and what we're going to do with that, and that's concerns I hear, which is fine, to keep that limited, no parking, to keep that opened up on that Sunset, which is very important to people, so I appreciate that. Yeah, and then, the zoning part I believe in. What you guys have said, you sold me a long time ago because it's dormant, dead land. People got to understand, like you said, it's been sitting there and doing nothing for years, and we continue to leave it where it's at. It's going nowhere. This is the best possible thing we can do for that land to bring more people into the city and actually do it with a fine presentation of buildings that you guys have presented. By getting just the interaction of the little things are going to matter to the people, with trees, the lines, the parking. So that's why I brought it up.
Thank you.
Mr. Townsend.
Yeah, I think
Okay, I got 2 more over here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. On, as I was looking at the previous planning actions, it looks like it was originally zoned as R2 back in 2000s. I don't know if you can speak to what caused it to change to commercial zoning, what actions were in place then, 'cause I don't know if that was at the time that Mr. Seymour's office was built.
It was actually before the time Dr. Simmons bought his lot. So initially, this particular area, before it was platted as the Town Center Fourth, did have a mixture of zoning. It had some multifamily zoning on the south end, had commercial more on the north end, which is about the same time when this Town Center Fourth plat came in as when Municipal Circle came in. I think at that time it was kind of seen as this would be a commercial hub, a commercial area of activity. City building in the middle of Municipal Circle, commercial lots around it, and the property owner of this land area at the time thought that that was a good location to extend Sunset Lane up to 58 and have commercial development there. So that came along around in 2000. I believe the first building, when Dr. Simmons built, I believe was 2006 timeframe.
I see. Excellent. Thank you. I was just curious on that because a lot of the conversation has been we're, changing our commercial space opportunities in the community and putting in more multifamily units. And then I transitioned over to and asked Mr. Ike a question related to our earlier in the year, last year, I believe, we had participated in the First Tier Cities program. May have the title incorrect, but educate me if I got that wrong. And basically, if I understood that program correctly, we applied for a grant program with the National League of Cities to come out, and ultimately we ended up partnering with MARC, Mid-America Regional Council, to study certain cities and then just look at their entire demographics, economic, housing, and different things. And there were some enlightening results out of the report in November, I believe it was, with respect to the housing for these specific communities that were, looked at. And for Raymore, it was very particular. While we weren't the 2 specific cities that were detailed out, with the full page down to all the statistics, but we were in the aggregate numbers when it came to the housing and some recommendations, some concerns with housing options in the communities. And some of the concerns were, and I'll coin the unsolicited response from our incoming superintendent, which was housing opportunities in an attractive price points. And so as we see, as articulated earlier, with all the other housing opportunities that are coming in, the single family and the multifamily units at varying price points, how does that information work as we see transitioning areas of opportunity which is outside our front door here, this commercial space that has sat for 20 years, and now we have a builder who has interest that's answering two things. Answering possibly a housing opportunity in a certain price point, and then taking a vacant opportunity away from, taking vacant land and put it to best use, because as Dr. Seamers attempted to put a commercial space there, it wasn't viable because of location. I'm not a business owner, but the term I hear a lot is location, location, location. So apparently that's not viable for that. I probably said a lot, not giving an answer to talk, but if you could just speak to high level on that first tier program and kind of what we gleaned from that.
Councilmember, I think you summed it up very succinctly, and really
Sorry.
to kind of put a finer point on it, the study really looked at Kansas City as a whole region and really advised cities on how to develop a deeper portfolio of those housing options, as both you and the superintendent spoke to, that various new residents, or even those residents who have lived within the community their entire lives, transition to different types of housing, and it's incumbent upon the city to have that variety and that option for residents, regardless of where they are in their life, to choose from.
Okay, thank you. And it'll come back to me later.
Thanks. Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question for city staff, probably Mr. Cataret. I saw that the Planning and Zoning Commission did vote for this with a vote of 7-1. Were there any concerns? I know there was one dissenting vote. Any specific concerns cited by P&Z regarding the applicant? Or
Comment on the dissenting vote, because after the vote's taken, the chairman always allows whoever voted against it to make comments. In the minutes, which reflects the record, what was said is that the commissioner commented that he voted against the motion as he had concerns with the impact the development will have on both traffic flow and traffic movement on 58 Highway. He was simply concerned of the ability, as Raymore continues to grow and we had housing units, of getting to Interstate 49.
And that was really the only concern that was mentioned, was just traffic.
Right, that was why he voted against the particular request.
Thank you, Mr. Cataret. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you would allow me, I have three questions. Can I ask them succinctly, or do you want me to?
No.
Okay. All right. Just to clarify for the record, I did watch the P&Z meeting. Actually, I watched it twice. I took notes the second time. And there was a lot of concern, which there seems to be. We either have not enough water or too much water. I mean, we never seem to have the right amount. And the retention pond that's across the road came up. And just for the record, if we don't change zoning on this, there's nothing that's going to happen with that retention pond at this time. Is that correct? And with the change of zoning and the new development going in, that's basically going to be a brand new, actually it's not I call it like a dry basin. It's going to be a brand new dry basin. And part of the concerns was that all that was going to go to Silver Lake. In my research, part goes to Silver Lake, part actually goes all the way through and ends up through Dutchman Acres, through that creek back there. Is that a correct statement?
After it leaves Silver Lake, yes.
Okay, and then...
It is directly tributary to Silver Lake.
Okay, and then with the new design, that will eliminate any silt going into Silver Lake, which potentially can happen now.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. And then I had a question about traffic. When I looked at the numbers that was in the packet, it actually shows less traffic going zoned with the PUD than potentially, of course, it hasn't done anything in 20 years, but say potentially something was to happen, it did get zoned commercial, that shows more traffic with commercial. And one of the things that I looked at, I drove around the area, I remember Mr. Moorhead's comment always, connectivity, we want connectivity. The area has actually more ways to go in and out than my neighborhood. And I live in a rather large, single-family neighborhood, and we don't have as many access and points as this have. The comments are made about sunset. Well, there's multiple ways in this, multiple ways out. So I'm very less concerned about that traffic, and I understand the traffic on 58, and potentially down the road we're going to deal with that. Let me see, I had one more question here. Oh, on the PUD, and I think the statement was made, the city has more control over this PUD than if it was just a residential area that they're doing single lots in there, or even at the commercial side of it. Is that a correct statement too?
That's absolutely correct. It allowed us to, for example, bring in the detention basin as an amenity and work with the developer to make those improvements to that detention basin. It allowed us to have the architectural controls that we wouldn't have under standard zoning, and the parking restrictions, and all the other requirements that fall under this development, that having the plan available for review as part of this rezoning application wouldn't happen under standard zoning. So it's staff's viewpoint, while it provides flexibility for the applicant in their planning and design, it provides control for the city in how this development looks, because we always like to say what you saw this evening is what you will see if this gets approved, and we normally can't say that with the applications that come before you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else from the council? Mr. Circo.
Sorry, one more question. You brought up, you're talking about your long driveways and your double car garages, the depth. And your restrictive, very heavy, restrictive HOA, will there be something in that would tell people they have to use a garage for vehicles and not store them up and use them as storage units where the cars can't get in? Or will there be, I didn't know if they'd have something, verbiage in your HOA about that. A lot of people do that.
Yeah, located in the HOA, it's regulated that the garage cannot be used for storage if the vehicle
I'm not
can't
in
be
an
parked
HOA, so I
inside.
didn't know.
But yeah,
Okay, great.
correct.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I'll remind the folks in the audience that this is a public hearing. If anyone now would like to come before the council and discuss either in opposition or in support of the project, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Anyone from the public?
Good evening. My name is Pam Hatcher of 1402 Young Circle, Raymore, Missouri. I am also the listing agent for these 5 properties, as well as the other 2 that were mentioned. One will remain commercial, and the second one did previously have a contract on it, and the seller does plan on going back to that buyer and putting it back under contract. Unfortunately, during the listing period, both owners passed away. So that's the reason the contract was canceled, and we're working through those appropriate issues. And then we will proceed with listing the other lot as well as putting the other contract under contract again. Or the other lot under contract again. I wholeheartedly support this development. As previously stated by Councilmember Townsend, these were residential lots originally. The previous owner, Neil Conway, did change the zoning back when the city decided to develop this and put the new city hall here. We had a very lengthy discussion about these lots when he was alive and when I decided to list these. And the specific reason he did it, along with his partner, was because he thought they would be worth more with the development in that. He came to realize very quickly with the multiple listings that he had that they were not due to the visibility. So he said, we would have to find a multifamily developer. That's what we did, and we've gone forward. I think it's going to be an excellent development, especially with the upper end multifamily development that the gentlemen have presented this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. Anyone else?
Cheryl Dunham, 404 North Park. Lots of questions have been asked. The only one I've never heard anything about, are any of these units going to be ADA? Are the sidewalks going to be disability accessible? I never heard anybody ask anything about that, if they're going to be, sidewalks and anything for any disabled people. I have a grandson that's disabled, so I'm just asking. I think everything else is just going to be whatever.
Jim, you want to take a shot at that?
I can indicate that the public sidewalks, like any public sidewalks, are ADA accessible, so they'll have the ramps at the intersections as always required.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the audience? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at this time. And are there any additional, well, we've got the public hearing closed now. I guess we're kind of move on to the motion phase here. So I would entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3529, reclassification of zoning, Sunset Plaza.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. The motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3529. Any further discussion? Mr. Holman.
Yes, sir. I had a couple of questions, and I know this came up before, but I did get a call from a constituent, and I said I would ask these. One of them, there's actually three questions. One may best be proposed to the developer, but I'll start, Mr. Cataret, with you. The question came up about the requirement for what was listed during my conversation as an engineering study. Now, the only thing I could glean from that would be an engineering traffic study. I can't think of anything else that would apply here. And as I read through the packet, it was pretty clear to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that an engineering study was not required or a traffic study was not required. However, due to the comments received at the Good Neighbor meeting, Public Works did go above and beyond and do a traffic impact study on this area at some point, determining that there weren't going to be any big issues with the amount of traffic flow that would be coming and going to this development, with the minor exception of needing some timing changes on the light at 58. Is that a correct read on my part, sir?
That is correct. The traffic study was not required because of the reduction in the trip generation going from commercial to multifamily. But based upon the comments, we did have, the Public Works Department did do a traffic analysis that looked at the traffic signal and looked at traffic movements on Sunset Lane. We did traffic counts on Sunset Lane, made adjustments to timing of the signal. So we did take some actions on our own, but never required the study.
And then the second of the three questions we touched on a little bit was water runoff, storm water runoff. As I read in the packet, that had been addressed not only at maybe the Good Neighbor meeting, planning and zoning, but as well as comments to staff here at the city. And what I read in the packet was a memo from Mr. Rocco stating that a 1% storm would probably raise the level in the detention pond to a maximum of 7 feet, and the proposed construction of the detention pond was going to be above and beyond that capability. It was going to be actually overbuilt as compared to the specifications that would be required for this development. Is that a correct assessment as well, sir? So, all right.
That's correct.
That takes care of number two, and then perhaps the developer can answer the question, and it was brought up by Ms. Dunham, was ADA compliance. I'm not sure exactly what. You touched on the sidewalk part of it. As far as the apartments, she did bring that up with me, and I'm not sure if there's a lot of relative bearing on that. But constituent asked the question, will any of the apartments be ADA compliant? I know obviously you're going to have steps. They're probably not designed for that, but for example, would any of the first floor apartments be ADA compliant?
We had a lot of internal discussions on that. I mean, Kansas City Code requires on their PUD, I think 2%, which is, 1.5 units here per se. But the folks that I've seen that have lived in my units in the past are usually fairly ambulatory, so we've always allowed accommodations to be met inside. And the exception to the HOA, whether we don't have a dog fencing or stake dog fences where dogs can run around the yard and use bathrooms is with people that have a disability. We will allow a temporary dog fence.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3530 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3530 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri approving the final plat for Sunset Plaza, a subdivision located in Town Center, 4th Plat, Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I'll ask Mr. Cataret to make a staff report on this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. This final plat, again, is for the project that we've been discussing, the Sunset Plaza. This is a replat of 6 lots within the Town Center 4th Plat. So we will be creating a total of 13 residential lots within this final plat. The Planning Commission did submit proposed findings of fact on their review of the final plat application. It was on February 18th that they voted 8-0 to accept those findings, submit those findings to the council with a recommendation of approval, subject to one condition, that is the approval of the final plat is contingent upon city council approval of the rezoning. We can't have the final plat of the private drive without the rezoning being approved. And I did include the development agreement that's also part of this application for your review. That concludes staff report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of staff? Hearing done, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3530, Sunset Plaza final plat.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. The motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3530. Any further discussion? Mr. Holman?
Just a little bit of math note for those of you that read through the packet. There were a number of people at the Planning and Zoning that spoke in opposition to this, but staff, as they normally do a very above and beyond job on diligence and what they put before us in printed material. There were, if you just count the numbers, there were 13 people who submitted emails or memos against the project and 12 in support. It's almost 50-50, just for your reference, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Barber?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of springboard on that as well. As going through the packet and watching the meeting and reading the emails, obviously when somebody comes before the DS, they state their name and address so we can identify that person where they live. My issue with the emails is that only 2 or 3 of them, I believe, actually identified themselves and who they were. The rest of them, I have no clue where that person lives, where they're at. So just for the record, if somebody's watching, if you send an email to P&Z Zoning or anybody of staff, it would be very helpful to identify yourself, where you live, who you are. Obviously, our identity is there as well, and it makes to me, the email is almost useless, and that's why social media at times is useless too, because you don't know who that person is or where they live. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Can I please have the first reading of Bill 3525 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3525 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Forever Green Professional Lawn Care for mowing and landscaping services.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Icky to make a staff report on this item.
Thank you, sir. The item before the City Council this evening is a contract with Forever Green Professional Lawn Care, a contract for mowing of city facilities and the landscaping of street medians and some of the islands that are owned by the city. In short, in the past couple years, as we've grown as a community, we've had more and more facilities come online. This would be a mowing contract just for City Hall, Centerview, the Public Works facility, the animal shelter, and those public facilities that aren't considered necessarily parks, aside from Centerview, including the 2 lots here owned by the city on Municipal Circle. Parks will continue to maintain their ball fields as well as the inside the parks, as well as the linear parkways. But in short, that's, and as well as Public Works will continue to maintain the locked areas such as grassy areas and lift stations and the Owen Good lift station. Terry Kennedy from Forever Green Professional Lawn Care is here tonight if you have any questions of the contractor.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Hickey? Yes, Mr. Holman.
So this, I would describe Mr. Hickey as an inevitable consequence of a growing city. Our Buildings and Grounds Department has historically had kind of a dual role in that they split their time and responsibilities between what most people would assume their responsibility to be Parks Department, but they actually maintain the buildings and grounds of the rest of the city facilities as well. And as we have built the popular amenities that we have via the Geo Bond project in the last couple of years, their responsibilities have swelled greatly, but their numbers have not. So this is, to me, an inevitable consequence. I would hope you would agree, of having to take something off of their plate, because with no more people and no more equipment, somebody's got to take up the slack. Is that a correct assessment, sir?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? Yes, Ms. Abdelgawad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a quick question. I'm wondering, this is for mowing and median landscaping services, and I know periodically I get calls from people complaining about the condition of the medians and the landscaping around City Hall and in some of our areas that are supposed to be decorative, and they get a little overcome with weeds. Is this going to help take care of that problem? I noticed it just said biannual, so will they only be weeding twice a year?
So for this contract, they will be doing a deep weeding and full mulching and trimming of any of the bushes or kind of the lower ground cover twice a year. Park staff will still do some of the checking and regular maintenance, but really what we needed to catch was that weeding at the beginning of the spring, and then the prepping of those flower beds with mulch, and then at the end of the, in the fall, prepping them for the winter. Those two times were really what Parks was spending more and more time on. And really with the number of medians that were out there, just weren't able to get to them, which may have led to some of those complaints.
Anything else? Oh, yeah.
So we shouldn't expect that to get better?
It absolutely will.
Because of the preparation at the beginning, it will be better throughout the year, but won't necessarily see more people out there pulling weeds.
I'd like to speak a little bit on that. I did include in there, the ability to go in there, but I think
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Could you identify yourself for the record?
Sorry that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Terry Kennedy, owner of Forever Green Professional Lawn Care, live at 1228 Wiltshire Boulevard in Creekmore subdivision.
Thank you.
Several customers in attendance here as well. But yes, we do plan to do some of that as well on a bi-monthly basis. Just go through it. What we've learned in our work in this kind of thing is, if you hit it a little bit every now and then, it gets away from the problem that you're speaking of. And yeah, I've noticed the same thing over time. So we plan to address that as well on top of whatever you can add support-wise.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have anything? If there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3525, award of contract for mowing and median landscaping services.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3525. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Could I please have the first reading of Bill 3526 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3526 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending the fiscal year 2020 operating and internal services budgets.
Thank you, sir. Staff report.
I would ask Mr. Hickey to make a staff report on this item, sir.
Thank you, sir. Pretty short and sweet. This item is the budget amendment required to support the previously approved contract for mowing and landscaping services.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Holman?
I move that we approve Bill 3526, budget amendment, general fund, buildings and grounds.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3526. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. Can I please have the first reading of Bill 3527 by title only?
The first reading of Bill 3527 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the city manager to approve the SCADA systems upgrade by Microcom in the amount of $55,065.
Thank you. Is there a staff report?
Thanks, sir. I'd ask Mr. Kraft to make a staff report on this item.
Thank you. Mr. Fearborn, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what you have before you this evening is a proposal from our contractor Microcom that provides software and hardware systems to control our various water and sewer lift stations and pumping stations. Tim Oakes from Microcom is in the audience if you have any questions. That concludes staff report.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to dispose of this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Holman.
I move that we approve Bill 3527, SCADA System Owen Good Pump Station Improvements.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the first reading of Bill 3527. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion carries unanimously, 8-0. We'll now move on to public comments. If anyone from the public would like to address the council at this time, please step forward, state your, identify yourself for the record, and keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll move on to Mayor Council communication, and I'll start with Ms. Abdelgawad tonight.
I don't have anything tonight. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of things. The first one, you kind of mentioned it to Mr. Mustine, was about the Rapex School Foundation, and what a great event, great cause. But as a person that was partly responsible, and of course the citizens of the city paid for it, to sit in that building of Centerview and have such a just well-done meeting, entertainment, the whole thing there. I was just thinking 4 or 5 years ago, we were at Loch Lloyd doing that. We had to drive out of town, go to another place, and do it in our own facility. It was so nice. Of course, I'm looking at it, trying to figure out how we can make it bigger, because we are a growing city, but it did do real well. And I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the comments the superintendent, Mr. Slagle, made about our city and some of the what some view as problems, me as an optimist view as opportunity, is we are growing. And with that, sometimes comes a little bit of heartburn. But in the long run, the way this city's run, the way our staff is, the way we've planned, the way we're growing, that's going to turn into more people, as I said before, having the Raymore experience. And I wouldn't want to sit on this dais and limit that to anybody. I enjoy it, and I know we all enjoy it, and I want more people to continue to enjoy it. And I think what we did tonight, it was something that's very good, and we're going to reap the benefits of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Holman.
Thank you, sir. I would concur with those comments. I think it was great to have Dr. Schlegel here, actually in advance of his actually taking over the school district. Is quite a commitment already to our community and school system, and bodes well for the future. I would like to share a story from my childhood. My grandmother lived in a very small community in northeast Missouri, over in the Kirksville area, very small town. And I remember being very excited when I went to my grandmother's house as a youth, because she had a 55-gallon oil drum in the back, and that's how they disposed of trash. And you got to use the stick matches, and you got to legally set fire to stuff, and that was the coolest thing on the planet. I remember one day going to my grandmother's house and her being furious because the city, in all their audacity, had decided to do away with such nonsense and do trash pickup. And as far as my grandmother was concerned, that was the end of the civilized world as we were to know it. She didn't like what had happened, but it was inevitable, it was progress, and it was what was best for the city. Again, she never did care for that, and I understand that. That's a natural human reaction. People don't like change, but is it what is in the best interest of the entire citizenry? Yes, it certainly was, and I think we see a lot of that and have seen a lot of that recently. I would leave with one item tonight, and I would implore our citizens, if you disagree on a subject, disagree. It is your right. It's probably almost your duty as a citizen of America and of the city of Raymore to make your point known. But please, I implore you, do not impugn staff when you do so. We have some of the most professional, I think the most professional and best staff around. Just for example, Mr. Crass has served this city for 18 years. Prior to that, he was an assistant city engineer in the city of Savage, Minnesota. He has his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering and is known and renowned among his peers and in the area for his knowledge. The assistant city engineer has now been swallowed up and has been promoted to I would call it chief engineer, director of public works at Belton, because they saw his good works. He came to us with quite a pedigree from both MoDOT and Kansas City, Missouri Public Works. Mr. Carteret has 16 years on with the city. Prior to that, he was with the city of Huntington, Indiana, also as the community development director, a Bachelor of Science in City Planning, and a Master in Public Administration. These folks are our paid professionals to know what works and what doesn't, and what's good for the city and what isn't. We have to make the final determination, but we have the best staff in the world in front of us giving us the information to make said decisions. Please do not impugn their abilities, their motives, or anything else about them, because they are fantastic people. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
That's a tough one to follow. I will agree with everything my colleagues to the right have said, and then leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple points real quick. Again, with Centerview, I was there, and it was a great gala for the foundation. They'll be back next February for another one, and I was there last year, and if you can go, please go. It's a great deal. It's a great opportunity to invest money into the school for the kids and the food and the CAN program and so many things. And Mr. Slagle stepping into Mr. Munset's shoes. So we're taking a great man in our school system who's moving on, and a great man is coming in to take his place. So that's a great thing to know. He's already here. He's already going to visit schools. He's visiting kids. He's doing so much. So he's doing 2 jobs right now as he gets ready to transition, and that's something that you don't see too often. Again, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wanted to talk about something that wasn't in our community, but I know a few years ago I said something that was reminding people that it's getting dark and you need to be careful in the mornings as you drive to work, bless you, or to school or wherever. And I said that I had a nightmare one time that I hit somebody as I was driving to school, and it was a child. And I said on this dais, I can't imagine anything worse than hitting someone on the way to school, hitting a child. But I wanted to give, a respectful remembrance for Mr. Bob, the crossing guard that was laid to rest today. He protected 2 children and kept them on their journey to their, wherever they're going to go in life. And I thought about when my son Will, who's a senior, he thinks he knows everything. He's in the National Guard and everything. But when he was a 5th grader, he wanted to have the crossing guard from Eagle Glen to our house for dinner. And I probably should have done it. But I didn't feel it was appropriate. I thought it was kind of maybe strange or whatever. But children really look up to these people. And I just wanted to say a few words, even though I've never met the man or know anything about him. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jacobson?
I can't follow up on any of this, sir. I agree with everything.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo what Mr. Councilmember Holman spoke to earlier. That's eloquent. I appreciate that. I've noticed that on several occasions when agenda items such as this come up, that seems to be the go-to tactic is to kind of impugn our staff, who is very professional, who are sought after by industry for their leadership and their skill sets and their areas of responsibility. But I also want to I believe since our last council session, several of our officers have been promoted, if I remember correctly. So some of them, as well as a new officer, was sworn in today, I believe, as well. Could you speak to those, Chief?
Thank you, sir. We had a promotional process and promoted Detective Sergeant David Billings to lieutenant, and he will be continuing to fill in investigations until we're able to make some promotions back behind that. Another sergeant obviously needs to be promoted. Sergeant Corey Miller will be moving into that detective sergeant spot. It's a lateral transfer, but obviously, his experience and expertise will really stand him in good stead there. And then Alan Prodel was actually sworn in today, and 3 new dispatchers today as well. So you'll see all that in the weekly report. Thank you, sir.
Outstanding. Thank you, Chief. And again, another illustration of our police officers, our staff being promoted internally, our former economic development director moving on to become the director of another community in economic development. So again, the staff recommendations and comments are not are coming before this council and this legislative body with a wealth of information and a wealth of experience that helps us make an informed decision for the betterment of the community today and tomorrow, and to maintain what we enjoy today, what drew Dr. Slagle to this community, what draws everyone to this community. Is what we are striving to continue to preserve. So again, thank you to staff and everyone who helps to make this process work as it does.
Thank you, sir. And I would echo that. I would say thank you to the staff again for your hard work and dedication, and appreciate everything that you do. I'm looking forward to the license plate reader demonstration at the work session. I know we've worked long and hard to get that installed eventually, and it'll be interesting to see how that helps us with our crime prevention efforts. And with that, I will go ahead and close the meeting, or ask if there's any need to move into executive session.
There is not, sir.
Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn this session of the Raymore
Thank
City
you. Is there a
Council.
second?
I will second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? It is unanimous. We're adjourned.